Hi there, welcome back to part 3 of the Rules of the Road review. In this part, we're going to focus on rules 20 through 31 in the Rules of the Road handbook and try to go over some of the more detailed questions that you might find on your U.S. Coast Guard examination. So we're going to turn in our books to page 32 and 33, and that's where we're going to discuss Rule 20. And it says that rules in this part shall be complied with in all weathers. Letter B says the rules concerning lights shall be complied with from sunset to sunrise. That makes sense, right? When it's dark, turn your lights on. And during such time, no other light shall be exhibited except such lights that cannot be mistaken for lights specified in the rules, or do not impair their visibility or distinctive character, or interfere with the keeping of a proper lookout. So there are times maybe you're working on deck and you'll have some deck lighting for safety of the crew. Those lights cannot be anything that could be seen in this book or construed as some other type of vessel. And we also don't want lights shining into the face of the lookout where they can't see out into the horizon. Letter C, the lights prescribed by these rules shall, if carried, also be exhibited from sunrise to sunset in restricted visibility, and may be exhibited in all other circumstances when it is deemed necessary. So the first rule said that we want to turn them on at sunset and turn them off at sunrise. That makes sense. The second one says that between sunrise and sunset, so those periods of normally when it's light, you are also required to turn those on in restricted visibility, but also it says you may turn them on any other time that you deem it necessary. So if you're the captain of the vessel and you're feeling like it may not be that great of visibility, or you just want to be a little bit more seen, go ahead and turn your lights on. There's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes you'll see vessels that turn them on when they leave the dock and leave them on until they come back. And that's totally fine because they deem that necessary. And then it says the rules concerning shapes shall be complied with by day. All of the shapes that we're going to talk about are black, so obviously you would not see those during the nighttime, so we don't put those up at night. There is a flag that will come up in the rules, but generally all the day shapes are black. Okay, let's look at Rule 21, which is going to define some of the lights that we're going to see. And it's going to go over the basic definitions of the lights, and you will see some test questions when it comes to the arc of visibility or the color, and there's also some diagrams in the diagram book that may reference some of these lights that you should be familiar with as well. So the first light is called a masthead light. Now the masthead light, if you look up here on the board, looks like this here. Okay? The masthead light is a white light placed over the fore and aft center line of the vessel, showing an unbroken arc of 225 degrees. So fixed as to show the light from right ahead to 22.5 degrees abaft the beam on either side. And so this kind of takes us back to some of the stuff we were talking about yesterday when we mentioned overtaking. We said that you were approaching more than 22.5 degrees abaft the beam. And that makes sense to keep it consistent with these arcs of visibility because the masthead light can be seen 22.5 degrees abaft the beam on both sides. So it's 180 plus 22.5 plus 22.5 gives us 225 degrees of visibility. All right, I'm going to write that over here. Now, if you had a circle of 360 degrees and the masthead is 225 degrees, that leaves a part of the vessel that you cannot see from the forward portion. So we'll talk about that in a minute. Now, the next set of lights that they discuss here are called side lights. And side light means a green light on the starboard side and a red light on the port side. And each of those show an unbroken arc of 112.5 degrees. And the easy way to remember the arc for the side lights is it's half of the masthead light. So if you know this whole thing is 225, half of that is 112.5 or 90 plus 22.5. So there's a lot of different ways to remember that. A lot of people remember port is red, port wine is red, port has the same amount of letters as left, L-E-F-T. So there's a lot of different ways you can remember that. And the starboard side is green. So these are called side lights. and they are 112.5 degrees each. Now, earlier I said that the masthead light was 225 degrees, and that left out part of the circle. Well, the remaining part of the circle is called a stern light. And on letter C it says a stern light means a light that is placed as nearly as practicable at the stern, showing an unbroken arc of 135 degrees and fixed so the light is 67.5 degrees from right aft on each side of the vessel. So this stern light is 135, and it says that it's 67.5 degrees on each side of the vessel. That's just half of 135. So 135 divided by 2 is 67.5 this way and 67.5 that way. So if you were to think about this as compared to the masthead light, notice it just makes up the difference. So 360 minus 225 gives us this 135. So that's kind of an easy way to remember that. And remember, the masthead light faces forward and the stern light faces aft. All right. Main things to think about this when you're talking about side lights and masthead lights and so on. If you're seeing a side light and or a masthead light, you are looking at a bow aspect of that vessel. So to determine which side, if I see red and white, that's the port bow. If I see green and white, that's the starboard bow. Now, if I'm looking at the vessel and I only see a stern light, a white light, that's a stern view. I will not be able to see these two, maybe for like a split second as the vessel crosses over into those different arcs, you can see them. But generally, once you get past that kind of gray area, you're either going to see these or you're going to see this. Okay, so those are your main lights that you'll see on most vessels. Not all carry all the lights, but those are the basic outline. Now, continuing down, letter D is called a towing light, and a towing light is a yellow light that has the same characteristics as the stern light. So if you'll notice here, the towing light is also 135 degrees, right? It has the same characteristics. However, it is yellow. So a towing light is yellow in color. It is also placed at the stern, and so you'll see those sometimes used together depending on what it's doing. But the towing light is yellow and 135 as well. Now E, all round light means a light that shows an unbroken arc of the horizon of 360 degrees. So you'll see here I have a white one, a red one, and a green one. The color does not matter, and that's why I put all of them up there. It could be other colored lights. The definition of the light is where you can see it. You can see an all-round light. Think of something that's round. It's 360. It's a ball, right? These all-round lights are 360 degrees of view, meaning I can see them all the way around the vessel. So when you look at the definition in the test question, an all-round light is a light that can be seen 360 degrees. Has nothing to do with the color. It can be many colors, okay? But it has to be seen all round. Now the next one, letter F, is called a flashing light, and a flashing light means a light that flashes at regular intervals at a frequency of 120 flashes or more per minute. So you'll notice here I have flashing light, and I have a blue, I have a red, and I have a yellow. Okay, it can be all of those colors depending on what's going on with it, but the definition is that it flashes 120 flashes or more per minute. Okay, so when you look at a test question, you may see something like, it will say, by definition, a flashing light is, and it may say a blue law enforcement light, a light that can be seen 360 degrees, a light that flashes 120 flashes or more per minute, or all of the above. So a lot of people jump on that answer that says all of the above, and that would be wrong, and most people do get that wrong because of that choice there. Because I told you that the definition is a light that flashes 120 flashes or more per minute, that's the definition. Can it be yellow? Can it be red? Can it be blue? Absolutely, but that is not part of the definition. So when you see this question, what is a flashing light? What you're looking for is how many flashes per minute does it list in the answer, and that's what you're going to go with. Don't fall for the trick that it's some color, because if you look in this book right here under flashing light, it says 120 flashes or more per minute. It does not say that it's red or yellow or that it's, you know, anything else about it. It's the flash pattern that we're looking at there. And then if you jump over to the inland side, there's one extra light there. We added something different to the towing scenario. So you'll see this special flashing light. It's letter G on the inland side. And it says a special flashing light is a yellow light flashing at regular intervals of 50 to 70 flashes per minute, placed as far forward and as nearly practicable on the fore and aft center line of a tow, showing an unbroken arc on the horizon of not less than 180 degrees and not more than 225. So the key things about this special flashing light, it is yellow, okay? It is 50 to 70 flashes per minute, okay? It is seen 180 to 225 degrees, and it's on the bow of a barge, okay? That is where you're going to see that. This light is only used in inland waters, okay? Only used in inland waters. The international community does not even recognize this light. It's not part of the rules. So if you see a question about a tug pushing a barge and it's got a yellow special flashing light on it, that cannot be international waters. So the reason that they give you this range here is because on average they want to see it every minute. And then 180 to 225, we have to be able to see that light at least from the beam forward. They would like it to be the same arc of visibility as the masthead light you would see on a vessel. But because these are typically on some sort of portable lantern that goes into a notch on the barge, it wiggles or it may blow with the wind, and so it turns a little bit. So they want to have some, you know, a range of visibility there for those lights. So it does give them a little bit of leeway for that portable light tree that might be installed there. So review, masthead light, white, it faces forward, it's 225 degrees. Side lights, half of that, 112.5, ports red, starboard's green. Stern light is what's left of a circle. 360 minus 225 gives us 135. It is white and it faces aft. Towing light is yellow, same degrees as a stern light, because remember, these are typically going to be put up together. An all-round light is something that is round. It does not have a specific color listed in the definitions. A flashing light is a light that flashes 120 flashes or more per minute. It could be a variety of colors, but that has nothing to do with the definition. A special flashing light is on inland only, 50 to 70 flashes per minute, 180 degrees to 225. And it's typically located on the bow of a barge that's being pushed ahead or alongside in inland waters. Now, Rule 22, there is some good stuff in Rule 22. Essentially, it tells you how far you can see these lights. There really are no test questions for the Coast Guard on this rule. However, just remember, the further you can see a set of lights on a vessel, the bigger it usually is. All right, let's go over to Rule 23. Rule 23 is the lights for a power-driven vessel, and it states a power-driven vessel underway shall exhibit a masthead light forward, a second masthead light abaft of and higher than the forward one, except a vessel less than 50 meters shall not be obliged to do so, and then side lights and a stern light. So what I have outlined here is power-driven vessel. Remember, we're only talking about power-driven vessels, vessels being propelled by machinery, not fishing vessels, not sailing, not under command, not restricted ability, none of those matter. We're talking only about PDVs, okay? So if it's less than 50 meters, she is going to show side lights, one masthead light, and a stern light. Now, she can show a second masthead light. It says she may, but she doesn't have to, and hardly ever would you ever see that, because most of the time these vessels aren't large enough to have a second masthead light, or they don't have a mast period, so you don't see that. Now, a power-driven vessel that's 50 meters or greater is going to have side lights, a forward masthead light, an aft masthead light that is aft of and higher, and then a stern light. And the reason it needs to be higher, because if I'm looking at this vessel in a head-on situation, I'm going to see two white lights in line, okay? One right over top of the other. Sometimes those are called range lights. And so if I'm looking at a vessel head on, I'm going to see red and green, and I'm going to see the two white ones in line. As that vessel starts to turn, I'll see the forward one and the aft one separate. The forward one will be lower and the aft one will be higher. These are required on vessels 50 meters and greater, 2 masthead lights. And these are on different masts, so one's in the front and typically one's in the back. Now, if you turn over to page 40, on page 40, you will see 2 different type vessels listed. Under letter B, you see an air cushion vessel when operating in the non-displacement mode shall, in addition to the lights prescribed in this rule, so these 2, shall exhibit an all-round flashing yellow light. So what they're talking about here is like the air cushion vessel when it's on cushion. So if you're around this area, there's LCACs or hovercraft in the Navy, and when they're just out there floating on top of the water, that's called the displacement mode. But once they blow up that air cushion and they're on cushion flying across the water, they are considered in the non-displacement mode, and at that time, they're going to show a flashing yellow light. And remember, a flashing light has to flash 120 flashes or more per minute. So you'll see this light just flashing like crazy, and it's going to be yellow. And that's going to indicate to you that this is a air cushion vessel that is flying across the water, capable of speeds of maybe 100 knots. So you want to give this vessel a lot of room. And the next one that you see here is letter C, a WIG, which I remind you is a wing and ground craft. And that's like a plane that flies close to the surface of the water. Unlike a seaplane that takes off and lands on the water, this one actually stays flying near the water. It is going to show a high intensity all-round flashing red light. So flashing as well, 120 flashes or more per minute, but this one's going to be red. So wing and ground craft is red, air cushion in the non-displacement mode is yellow. So we can identify those vessels and steer clear of them. Now, if you turn over to page 42 and 43, we'll get into some of the smaller vessels. Now, there is a difference between international and inland, so it's important to notice that. A power-driven vessel of less than 12 meters in length may, in lieu of, that kind of means instead of, the lights prescribed for these, paragraph A, exhibit an all-round white light and side lights. So if you notice in the book, you'll see a smaller, maybe like a John boat here, all right, a little rowboat. You'll see the all-round white light. And that's because this vessel is so small, it typically is not going to have maybe a battery or any kind of power. And so they are allowed to have an all-round white light. So going down to II, a power-driven vessel of less than 7 meters whose maximum speed does not exceed 7 knots may, in lieu of the lights prescribed in paragraph A, exhibit an all-round white light. So basically less than 12 and less than 7 who has a max speed of 7 knots, the same thing. And then III says the masthead light on this vessel may be displaced from the fore and aft center line of the vessel if center line fitting is not practicable. So you see in that picture, you've got the guy in the little boat there with the outboard motor. That all-round white light is off to the side versus being in the center. And when I say they don't have a battery, they have to have something to power this small light, but they may not have a battery that cranks an engine, so to speak. So you will have to have a power source for that. Now for the inland side, they don't get into those details for 7 meters and 7 knots and so on. All they do is address the vessel less than 12 meters may show the all-round white light. And that's what you see over here on this little rib boat. You'll see the smaller vessel with an all-round white light. And they also want them to exhibit the side lights on this vessel for inland, whereas on the international side, they do not require that. So for the power-driven vessel in inland waters, they're going to have the all-round white light, and they're going to have the side lights as well. Okay, so we're going to see white forward and aft on inland waters, and we're also going to see those side lights. So that's a little bit different than the international, where you only have to have that all-round white light aft. And then turn over to page 45. Page 45, we have a power-driven vessel when operating on the Great Lakes, she may carry an all-round white light in lieu of, so instead of that second masthead light and stern light prescribed by paragraph A, the light shall be carried in the position of the second masthead light and be visible at the same minimum range. So what they mean here is instead of having a separate aft masthead light and stern light, they allow them to combine the two into one all-round white light aft, and it's going to be where the second masthead light would be. And most of that's just to raise it up so they can see that maybe better in the fog. These are very large vessels, so we want to be able to see them as easily as possible. But that rule where you combine the aft masthead light with the stern light only applies on the Great Lakes. So that's very specific. So that's Rule 23. So now we're going to move on to towing vessels, which is going to be Rule 24. Continuing on with Rule number 24, we're going to discuss towing. And this is a pretty extensive topic. So I've put a few things on the board, and we'll talk about some of the other things that are listed in the book. So if you would turn into your handbook, page 46 and 47, there is an extensive kind of presentation of towing, and this starts out with towing astern. And so we're going to look at all of the different ins and outs, because it is pretty complicated when you're first seeing this, trying to understand all of the different lengths and different day shapes and lights that you might show on a towing vessel that's towing astern. And so we want to make sure that you have a good grasp of this section so that when you see some of these diagrams in the diagram book, you understand exactly what's going on. So letter A says, a power-driven vessel when towing shall exhibit, instead of the lights prescribed in 23A or 23AI, two masthead lights in a vertical line. So instead of how they had before, a masthead forward and a masthead aft, when you're towing astern, you're going to have two masthead lights in a vertical line. That means in a row or in a line. When the length of the tow measures from the stern of the towing vessel to the aft end of the tow exceeds 200 meters, three such lights in a vertical line. So when it exceeds 200 meters, we're going to have three lights in a vertical line. And then it says side lights, a stern light, and a towing light in a vertical line above the stern light. And so that's kind of really all that they say about towing astern. And so we have about 4 different scenarios that I'm going to discuss that kind of goes over these rules. Now the last line there says when the length of tow exceeds 200 meters, a diamond shape where best seen. Okay, so let's pause from the book and let's look up here on the board. And we're going to focus on the different scenarios that we may see with towing astern. So I'm going to start here with the first scenario. We have the towing vessel and we have a barge, so to speak. Doesn't always have to be a barge, but there are certain things that are always going to be the same on a towing vessel and on the object being towed. For instance, you will always have side lights, so red and green on the tow, the tug itself or the towing vessel. And then you will have yellow over white, which means towing at night. Yellow over white is towing at night, and that's typically towing astern, so it's an easy way to remember that. Now, on the barge or whatever the object is being towed, you're going to see a red and green side light and also a white stern light. Okay, so you're having your perimeters marked with lights so that other vessels can see that this tow is out there. So the red, green, and white is just to indicate the edges or the perimeter of the tow itself. So the red and green, the yellow over white, the red, green, and white, all of that is common in all 4 of these situations. Where it's going to get different is the masthead lights. How many masthead lights are shown in each of the scenarios? So if we think back to the previous rule for power-driven vessels, we remember that for a power-driven vessel, less than 50 meters is only required to show 1 masthead light forward. But for a vessel that was 50 meters and greater, she was required to show a second masthead light aft of and higher than the forward masthead light. So that is going to come into play here, because if we have a towing vessel that's over 50 meters, we have to indicate that by putting that second masthead light aft of and higher. And so when we look at this first scenario, we have a towing vessel that is less than 50 meters. So she does not have an aft masthead light. All she will show is two masthead lights in line. Anytime you see two masthead lights in line, that means the vessel is doing some sort of towing, and it could be towing astern, alongside, or pushing ahead, only if it's two though. And so when we look at this scenario with only two, what that means is I have a small tug and a small tow. And when I say small tug, it doesn't have to be a tug, it could be a vessel, but another type of vessel. It means it's less than 50 meters from the bow to the stern. And then for the tow, it's from the stern of the towing vessel to the stern of what's being towed. In this case, it's a barge. So this distance here is less than 200 meters, okay? 200 meters or less than 200 meters. And so we have two in a line at the masthead, which indicates small tug, small tow. So less than 50, less than 200. Pretty straightforward. Now we move to this scenario, and we still have a towing vessel that's less than 50 meters. However, in this case, our tow exceeds 200 meters, okay? If it exceeds 200 meters, we will have three in a row, in line, okay? And I always remember is 3 is greater than 2. 3 is greater than 2. And so I know that if I have a tow that's greater than 200 meters, I'm going to have 3 masthead lights in line. Now the other thing that I also have to have on the towing vessel and the object being towed is a diamond shape. That means that the tow exceeds 200 meters. And we're going to put that where best seen. And I'll show you in the book where it shows it for the towed vessel as well later. But we're going to have a diamond shape where best seen on the towing vessel and the object being towed. So less than 50, so both of these scenarios is a smaller towing vessel. There is no aft masthead light on either of these. This is less than 200 because there's 2 in line. This exceeds 200 because there's 3 in line, okay? Now in this third scenario, we've bumped up the size of the towing vessel, okay? This towing vessel is 50 meters or greater. Because it is greater than 50 meters or greater, we're going to have the aft masthead light. This light is just the size of this vessel, okay? The 2 in line is the size of the tow. So because my tow is less than or equal to 200 meters, I'm going to have 2 in line. So the 2 in line indicates it's less than 200 meters for the tow, and the aft masthead light indicates this towing vessel is larger, 50 meters or greater. In this scenario here, the last scenario, we got 3 in line. Remember, I said 3 is greater than 2. So because I have 3 in a row vertically, my tow exceeds 200 meters, okay? But I also have this aft masthead light, which means that my towing vessel is also 50 meters or greater. So this is a big tug and a big tow. And if I was looking at this vessel head on, obviously it's not drawn exactly. This would actually be up here, okay? So let's do that, make sure we get the correct kind of view. Okay, that's going to be a little higher, still in the same placement, but aft up and higher. When you look at this in line from a bow view, you would see 4 in a row. So this one would appear up here, and then you would have 4 in a row. Here you would have 3 in a row, but if that vessel turned, then you would clearly see that this vessel is over 50 meters. Okay, so in these scenarios, these are a vessel that's less than 50, tow less than 200, greater than 200, which is why we have 3 in a line. This one, the tug is 50 meters or greater, has the aft masthead light, It has a smaller tow, which is less than 200. And then we have a towing vessel here that's 50 meters or greater with a tow that exceeds 200 meters. So we have the 3 in line for the tow and the aft masthead light for the towing vessel that's greater than 50 meters. And then remember, if it exceeds 200 meters, we're going to have a diamond shape on the tug and the tow where best seen. So that's a good kind of review of those lights, and it definitely takes practice looking at those and especially comparing them to how you would see them in a Coast Guard exam. So definitely practice those. So that kind of summarizes pages 46 and 47. So if you look at the pictures there, you'll see in this particular diagram, you have 2 in line. So that means the towing vessel is less than 50 meters. And the tow is less than 200, right? This one here, I see 3, which means 3 is greater than 2. So my tow is exceeding 200 meters, but I also do not have an aft masthead light. So this vessel is less than 50 meters. So 3 in line. If it was greater than 50 meters, I'd have an aft masthead light here, okay? So turning the page, it gives us an integrated tug and barge. And so when you see what's located on 48 and 49, what this means is that a pushing vessel and vessel being pushed ahead are rigidly connected in a composite unit. They shall be regarded as a power-driven vessel. So when you have a vessel like this, where the tug is connected to the barge rigidly, meaning they move as one unit in the sea, right? That's considered just a normal power-driven vessel, and it'd be lighted as a ship of its size. So on this picture, you have the less than 50 meters, and you have this picture that's 50 meters or greater, okay? So just think about it. Now, if this tug and barge moves separately like that, then that is pushing ahead. That is not going to be considered a composite unit. Okay, now, Rule 24 continued on page 50 and 51. They get into pushing ahead or alongside. And one thing to note in this rule right here is that there is a significant difference between the international and inland rules. So if you look at the top of page 50, it says a power-driven vessel when pushing ahead or towing alongside shall exhibit the lights in 23A, 2 masthead lights, instead of 23A, 2 masthead lights in a vertical line, side lights, and a stern light. And then for inland, it says power-driven vessel pushing ahead or towing alongside shall exhibit, instead of the lights prescribed in 23A, 2 masthead lights in vertical line, side lights, and 2 towing lights. So that's a big difference. So if we look right here, this vessel that's pushing ahead or towing alongside has a single stern light back there. If you were looking at this vessel from sea, you would probably not know that they are pushing ahead right off the bat. Well, we didn't really like that rule. So what we did in the inland community, we pushed a yellow over yellow back there. And yellow over yellow, we remember, is pushing that fellow. Yellow over yellow, pushing that fellow. And that's in inland waters. So there is a big difference between what you're going to see on the stern view of the towing vessel. So for international, you'll just have a white stern light. Obviously, it's white. And then you'll have yellow over yellow, or 2 towing lights on the inland side. Now, looking at page 52 and 53, you'll see 2 examples of vessels being towed, and it shows those kind of running lights, so to speak, the red and green side lights and the stern light there, and then the diamond shape where best seen when the tow exceeds 200 meters. And then if you turn over to 54 and 55, you will see the towing vessel engaged with pushing ahead and alongside. On page 54 is the international side. Notice that we see the single white light at the stern. Okay, 2 white lights in a vertical line, which always indicates some sort of towing. In this case, it's pushing ahead. And then look below it. for the alongside. The only thing that's added there is the stern light on the barge, because we want to make sure we light that up. We don't put it on the one pushing ahead because it would shine back into the wheelhouse. Now, looking on the inland side, you'll notice that we have a little bit of difference there, and we have the yellow over yellow pushing that fellow on the stern of the towing vessel. But look up on the bow of the barge here. On the bow of the barge, we have a light there that we do not have on the international side. And if you remember correctly, I mentioned that in the inland lighting configurations, we added a special light, and it was called a special flashing light. Well, this is where that comes into play, because in inland waters, we wanted to indicate that we are pushing ahead or alongside, and so we added this special flashing light. And remember, that's a light that's yellow. It flashes 50 to 70 flashes per minute. It is visible 180 to 225 degrees. Remember, get a little wiggle room there because it's usually a portable lantern. And it's mounted on the bow of a barge center line. So you see a picture of that in both of these pictures. We see the special flashing light on both of those. And remember, that is just on the inland side for the rules. Now, on page 56 and 57, you'll get into some inconspicuous, partly submerged vessels or objects in tow, and you definitely see a bunch of questions about this on the test. And really, this comes down to how wide is it and how long is it. And remember, these are partially submerged, so these are not going to show the red and green side lights. This might be part of a dredge pipeline that's right on the surface of the water. And so under letter GI, it says if it is less than 25 meters in breadth, one all-round white light at or near the forward end and one at or near the after end, except Dracones need not exhibit the light at or near the forward end. So generally, if it's less than 25 meters wide, one forward and one aft, showing just basically the length of it, right? If it's 25 meters or more in breadth, we want to have two all-round white lights at the extremities of its breadth. So if it's less than 25 as far as in breadth, we just need the fore and aft. But if it's over 25, we need fore, aft, and both sides. So it's going to have all sides lit up. And then it says under III, if it exceeds 100 meters in length, an additional all-round white lights between the lights that we talked about in the previous paragraphs, so that the distance between the lights not exceed 100 meters. So if it's a long pipeline, we're going to have lights every 100 meters to indicate the length of that partially submerged object. Now, if you jump over to the inland side, there's an extra rule that's written there. Letter V under G, letter V, the towing vessel may direct a searchlight in the direction of the tow to indicate its presence to an approaching vessel. I've seen that on the test, and I consider this to be maybe a situation like Sea Tow or Towboat US, where they don't necessarily have all of these towing light options. They can take a searchlight and shine it back towards the broken down vessel that might be in tow, or if you went out with some friends and had to call them for a tow in, they might just direct a searchlight towards you. But that's in the inland option. And what they'll say on the test generally is, in inland waters, what is an additional option for illuminating a vessel or object in tow, and that would be a searchlight. All right, if you turn over to page 59, there's one kind of caveat to the towing, and it says notwithstanding paragraph C of this rule on the western rivers except below the Huey P. Long Bridge at mile 106.1 above the head of passes on the Mississippi River and on water specified by the Secretary, a power-driven vessel when pushing ahead or towing alongside, except as paragraph B of this rule, shall exhibit side lights and two towing lights. And so if you see, even in the book here, you have this vessel that is pushing ahead, and if she is above the Huey P. Long Bridge on the Mississippi, she is not required to show those masthead lights. Sometimes these vessels may put their mast down so that they can fit under a bridge, so they're not required to show the masthead lights inline. And that also kind of reinforces the idea of yellow over yellow, pushing that fellow in inland waters. Okay, that takes us to Rule 25. And Rule 25 is sailing vessels or vessels under oars. Those are in the same category. So a sailing vessel underway shall exhibit side lights and a stern light. So just like you see here in this little small vessel, right? Side lights and a stern light. That's it. What you'll notice difference between the sailing vessel and a power-driven vessel is that a sailing vessel does not show white lights forward. They do not have a masthead light. There is nothing you're going to see forward on a sailing vessel. So you'll just see the side lights, and then from the stern view, you will just see the stern light. It also says a sailing vessel of less than 20 meters in length, the lights prescribed in paragraph A of this rule may be combined into one lantern carried at or near the top of the mast where best seen. So that's where you'll see this little combined lantern up here. So they put all of the lights at the top, just kind of raises them up, makes them a little bit more visible to those that might be looking at them from a distance. If you turn the page to page 62, it says a sailing vessel underway may, in addition to the lights prescribed in paragraph A of this rule, exhibit at or near the top of the mast where best seen 2 all-round lights in a vertical line, the upper being red, lower being green, but these lights shall not be exhibited in conjunction with the combined lantern. So you can have those additional lights right here at the top, red over green, but you have to have the lower lights also. You can't have the combined lantern and the red over green. And so I always remember red over green, sailing machine. Red over green, sailing machine. There's lots of different memory aids, and it's important to understand them. On page 64, remember this rule applied to sailing vessels and vessels under oars. So on page 64, a sailing vessel of less than 7 meters in length shall, if practicable, exhibit the lights prescribed in paragraph A or B, but if she does not, she shall have ready a hand electric torch or lighted lantern showing a white light in time to prevent collision. So what they mean there is some sort of flashlight, some sort of spotlight where they can light up themselves and show another vessel that they're out there. But remember, this is a small sailing vessel, less than 7 meters. The same rule applies to a vessel under oars. They would like a vessel under oars to show the red, green, and white. But if you're out there just rowing along, or you're in a small canoe or something like that, you're required to have a hand electric torch or lighted lantern. And we would interpret that to be a flashlight. And the last rule under sailing is on page 66. And it says a vessel proceeding under sail when also being propelled by machinery shall exhibit forward where best seen a conical shape apex down. And so that's going to be, this is a conical shape. The point or apex is down. And how I remember this, if a sailing vessel is under power, I say look down at my engines. And that reminds me that that cone is going down. Look down at my engines, because there's going to be an option where you're looking up at something else. It means something totally different. So a review, red over green sailing machine, no masthead lights, okay? And if they're under power, they have to show that day shape of a cone with the apex pointed downward. And the last thing that we're going to cover is fishing vessels. And there's a lot of details in this rule, a lot of questions that people miss. So on page 68 and 69, it starts off by saying fishing vessels, a vessel engaged in fishing, whether underway or at anchor. That right there is a test question. A test question may say something like, which of the following vessels show the same lights underway or at anchor? Well, we now know that it's a fishing vessel. So if this fishing vessel is underway, showing all the things we're going to talk about, and they all of a sudden go to anchor, they don't change and start doing anchor lights. They keep what they have, okay? B, when engaged in trawling. So in this rule, they actually separated out the trawlers from the fishing vessels. So there's a few things that are similar, but generally they show a different light pattern. So if the vessel is trawling, which means dragging through the water a dredge net or other apparatus used in fishing, she shall exhibit 2 all-round lights in a vertical line, the upper being green and the lower being white. Green over white, trawling at night. Green over white, trawling at night. Okay, and if it's during the day, 2 cones with the apexes together. So 2 cones with the points together.
And I always remember this as two fishes kissing. That looks like two fish to me, and it looks like they're kissing, two fishes kissing. So it helps me remember that it's fishing, because this day shape actually applies to both trawling and fishing. When we get to that rule, you'll see that it's listed there as well. So two fishes kissing applies to trawling and fishing. Now the one difference, another type of test question you should make sure you know, letter II, BII. A masthead light abaft of and higher than the all-round green light, a vessel of less than 50 meters shall not be obliged, but may do so. So what they've done in this particular rule is they have said that if your vessel is greater than 50 meters greater, you must show an aft masthead light. Okay, you must show that aft masthead light there. And then finally, when you make way, you have to turn on your running lights. That's your side lights and your stern light. So side lights and stern lights come on when you start making way. And so that's what you'll see here in these pictures. So in this picture here, we have the trawling vessel, okay? And we have the top one is less than 50 meters, and she's making way because I can see side lights and a stern light. And then this one here, I see that she's also making way because I see side lights and a stern light, but I see an aft masthead light, which means she is 50 meters or greater. Okay. Now, if you look on this side of the page, you'll see the same type of vessel, except for these are not making way. So you see no side lights. You just see the difference of the size. One is less than 50 and one is 50 meters or greater. So a bunch of test questions there. Anchored or underway, show the same signal. Green over white, trawling at night. The two fishes kissing, the two cones with the points together. The second masthead light on a trawler 50 meters or greater. And then the side lights and stern light for making way. So, you know, a good 5 to 10 questions right there in that section that we just covered. And then the last thing for this rule is fishing. So fishing other than trawling. Two all-round lights in a vertical line, the upper being red and the lower being white. On page 70, it shows you red over white, fishing at night. Red over white, fishing at night. Red over white, fishing at night. Green over white, trawling at night. Red over white's fishing at night. And she's also going to show the two cones with the apexes together, the two fishes kissing. All right, and then on letter II, when there is outlying gear extended more than 150 meters horizontally from the vessel, an all-round white light or a cone with the apex up. So if you have gear out, let's say you have long lines out on one side of your vessel, during the day you're going to show a cone with the apex up, which I remember, look up at my gear. Look up at my gear. At night, you're going to have the white light, and that's going to be on the side of where your gear is at. So if you see here, I drew some long line out there, and I've got the two fishes kissing, and then I've got the cone with the apex up, showing that on this vessel, my starboard side is where my gear is out, and that's going to tell others to just kind of avoid that area. And then III states that when making way through the water, turn on your running lights, side lights, and a stern light. And that's just a common thing that you'll see with these trawlers and fishing vessels. When they're underway and making way, turn on those running lights. Okay. So that takes us through page 71. And on page 73, to round out the fishing vessels, you'll see that there's some additional signals for fishing vessels in close proximity. And I talked about this in the first lesson, that there are signals that vessels can use when they're fishing together. And those are listed under, on page 73, letter F, II, A, B, and C. So when shooting their nets, two white lights. When hauling their nets, one white over red. And when the net has come fast on an obstruction, two red in a vertical line. And you will definitely see some of those type of questions on your test. So just make sure you review those signals for those trawlers that are working in close proximity. We're going to continue on with rule number 27, which is on page 74 and 75 in the Rules Handbook. And this rule number actually applies to two different types of vessels.
not under command, and restricted inability to maneuver. But the first pages only talk about not under command. Sometimes people confuse what you see on the first 2 pages to be for both types of vessels, and that's just not the case. So when we look at this rule, the first pages are not under command. And if you remember back from the first part of this series, we defined as not under command as a vessel that is, due to some exceptional circumstance, she is unable to maneuver as required by the rules. So when I think of that, like I mentioned, I always think an engineering circumstance. That's not always the case. However, it's a good kind of memory aid. So maybe they've lost propulsion, lost steering, they're dragging anchors, something like that. So when they're not under command, they are not able to maneuver as required by the rules. So we would want to indicate that to other vessels in the area so that they may avoid us if we were to get into a sticky situation. So looking on page 74, it says a vessel not under command shall exhibit 2 all-round red lights in a vertical line where best seen, or 2 balls or similar shapes in a vertical line where they're best seen. So I have that here, red over red, vessel's dead. Now some people say red over red, captain's dead, and that's a very common memory aid. However, I don't particularly like that one just because some people have construed that to mean that the captain has had some sort of medical emergency and needs evacuation from the Coast Guard, and that's not necessarily what this means. So I don't particularly like that memory aid. Plus, it doesn't really help me kind of remember what type of vessel this is. So I like to say red over red, the vessel is dead. Whatever works for you is fine, but just remember that red over red is for a vessel that's not under command. So the equivalent day shapes would be 2 black balls. So typically, and this isn't always, but typically reds equal balls. That's not always the case, but in this case, you can equate that. So 2 red or 2 black balls means that the vessel is not under command, and due to some exceptional circumstance, she is unable to maneuver as required by the rules. Now, one other note in that particular rule is right here. It says, when making way, turn on side lights and a stern light. And I remember telling you back in the first lesson that you can be not under command and still make way, meaning you might be limping along at a very slow speed, or maybe you're using your engines to get yourself where you need to be. You don't have steering, but if you're a twin engine, you can kind of get generally going in the correct direction, maybe to pick up a tug assist or something like that. So you can still make way even though you're not under command. So in that case, if you are making way, meaning you're propelling yourself through the water through some means, you would need to turn on your side lights and your stern light to indicate that you are making way, okay? Now on this vessel, she will not turn on her masthead light. And the reason for that is there's another vessel that we're going to talk about next that would show a red, white, red scenario. So if we turned on a masthead light for not under command, from some angles, it could look like another type of vessel. So a not under command vessel never shows a masthead light. So 2 red in a vertical line or 2 black balls. And if you're making way at night, go ahead and turn on your side lights and your stern light for not under command. So that's this vessel here, not under command, 2 red, red over red, the vessel's dead, or 2 black balls. Turn on your side lights and your stern light if you're making way. Now on page 76, we continue with the rule number, but it's a different type of vessel. Now this vessel is restricted in ability to maneuver. And if you remember, restricted in ability to maneuver was due to the nature of her work. So she's doing some kind of work out there. She's laying dredge pipeline, she's laying cables, she's landing aircraft, she may be servicing an aid to navigation. She might be in an extreme tow situation, or she might be, doing anything that involves work, diving operations, and so on. So we will show a different set of lights, even though it's under Rule 27, a different set of lights for a vessel that is restricted in ability to maneuver. And that's what this means. RAM is a common abbreviation for that. So in the rules, page 76, it says except a vessel engaged in mine clearance. Now, mine clearance has its own lights and shapes, which we'll talk about here in a few minutes. But this is all the other restricted vessels except mine clearance. Now, letter BI states 3 all-round lights in a vertical line. Remember, all-round is 360, so we've got to be able to see those all around the vessel. The highest and lowest will be red, and the middle will be white, okay? So red over red, working vessel ahead. Red over red, working vessel ahead. So we've got a red, then a white in the middle, then a red, all in line, all round. Red, red, working vessel ahead. Now, the equivalent day shape for that is ball, diamond, ball. Now, in this scenario, the balls are representative of the reds, and the white is represented by a diamond. So ball, diamond, ball, or red, white, red means working vessel ahead. So if you can remember that RAM is due to the nature of her work, red over red is working vessel ahead. Now, there's a little bit more to it. In letter I says, when making way through the water, a masthead light or lights, side lights, and a stern light. So how I would remember that is that a vessel that is restricted in ability to maneuver, that is also making way, is going to show the normal lights for a power-driven vessel of her size. So if she's less than 50 meters, then she's going to show one masthead light, side lights, and a stern light. If she's 50 meters or greater, she's going to show a forward mast, an aft mast, side lights, and a stern light. So I just kind of summarized that to mean all of the lights for that size power-driven vessel when she's restricted in ability to maneuver and making way. And then IV says when at anchor, in addition to the lights and shapes here, red, white, red, or ball, diamond, ball, the lights or shapes prescribed in Rule 30. So she would show the appropriate anchor lights and shapes with this vessel. So you could be at anchor doing something like this. One of my ships, we anchored over top of some wreckage for a couple of weeks. And so we needed to show that we were restricted ability to maneuver. We were doing some work, but we also wanted to let other vessels know that we were anchored. Okay. So we'll talk about those anchor lights in a future rule, but that's the gist of red, white, red, and ball, diamond, ball. That is restricted ability to maneuver. Now, if you turn to page 79 in the book, it says a vessel engaged in a towing operation which severely restricts the towing vessel and her tow in the ability to deviate from course shall, in addition to the lights prescribed here, okay, will exhibit the lights in Rule 24. So basically, whatever lights that the towing vessel would have shown for her size and the size of her tow, and that was covered in an earlier lesson, she will also show the red, white, red. So you could have red, white, red plus 2 inline or 3 white inline, just depending on the size of the tow. All right, turning the page to page 80, we're going to get into something that kind of carries on the restricted inability to maneuver to the next level. And essentially what we're talking about here is a vessel engaged in dredging or underwater operations when restricted in her ability to maneuver shall exhibit the lights and shapes prescribed in the paragraphs on the previous page. And in addition, when there's an obstruction, 2 all-round red lights or 2 balls to indicate the side where the obstruction exists, and 2 all-round green lights or 2 diamonds to indicate the side on which a vessel may pass. Now, that's what is indicated here. So we're talking about dredging. So maybe the Army Corps of Engineers is dredging out a channel. Or if we have underwater operations, I would think of that maybe as like diving operations. We're going to have the normal red, white, red, which indicates the vessel is doing some kind of work, restricted ability to maneuver. We're also going to have 2 red lights on the side that's obstructed, and we're going to have 2 green lights on the side that is clear to pass. So we're letting you know that this side is the no-go side, and this is go. It's easy to remember if you just think of it like a stoplight. When you see red, red means stop. You see green, green means go. So that's the easiest way to remember it. Now the day shapes corresponding, ball, diamond, ball means restricted ability to maneuver. The two balls are equivalent to the two reds. That means stop. The two diamonds in this case are equivalent to the two greens. Now that's a little different than what we saw previously. And what I remember, an easy way that I remember, diamonds are better than pearls. You can remember that several different ways, but I would say, you know, diamonds typically are a little bit more expensive, so people think they're a little bit better. So diamonds are better than pearls, meaning diamonds are the good side and pearls are the bad side. The two diamonds mean go, the two balls mean stop. So however you remember that, remember this is an obstruction exists on one side or the other. For example, on a previous ship that I was on, we had some divers and they would go down and do some work. So on the side that they were diving, there were air hoses and other things that we needed for them to maintain their life and communication. And so that would be the side that we would indicate the red side or the two black balls. On the other side of the ship, where there was nothing going on, where we wanted vessels to pass around us, we would show the two green and the two diamonds. Okay, now there's one other note on page 80 that talks about letter D, I. It says, when at anchor, the lights or shapes prescribed in this paragraph instead of the lights in Rule 30. Now, Rule 30 is the anchor lights and shapes. So this vessel, dredging or underwater operation, does not show anchor lights or shapes. And the reason is it would get really confusing as to what you were looking at from a distance. If we put up another ball or if we put up some more white lights, we wouldn't really be able to tell what's going on here. And to be honest with you, it doesn't matter. As long as you know which side to pass, everything's going to work out good. All right, now if you look on the inland side, there is a additional set of listings there, DIV, so Roman DIV. It says a dredge pipeline that are floating or supported on trestles shall display the following lights at night and in periods of restricted visibility. So nighttime or maybe a foggy situation, one row of yellow lights, and then it gets into more details. Jump down to number two red lights at each end of the pipeline, including the ends in a channel where the pipeline is separated to allow vessels to pass. The lights may be, and then it gives some more detail. We don't really need to know those details just for the Coast Guard test. So what I have indicated here is the pipeline. So the pipeline is here. This is the yellow lights. Okay, those lights are going to be flashing 50 to 70 times and so on. Then we're going to have two red lights in a vertical line on each side of the pipeline that's open for it to pass a vessel, and then more yellow where the pipeline continues on. So the two reds is where you want to pass through that opening. But remember, the dredge pipeline is going to be indicated by some flashing yellow lights. All right, that's the end of rule, there's one more thing about Rule 27, and on page 82 and 83, it says, when the size of a vessel engaged in diving operations makes it impracticable to exhibit all the lights and shapes that we talked about here, she shall exhibit 3 all-round lights in a vertical line where best seen. That's still going to be the red, white, red option, okay? And then for the day shape, a rigid replica of the International Code Flag Alpha, not less than 1 meter in height. So that flag Alpha is white and blue, and you'll see that there. Okay, notice this is small, maybe dive boat. That flag has to be rigid because if the wind stops blowing and the flag goes limp, we wouldn't be able to see what it is. So it needs to be on something rigid, metal, wood, or whatever it is, kind of indicating at all times that the vessel is restricted ability to maneuver and diving. Now, on the next page, we have a mine clearance vessel. This vessel is listed on its own just because of the type of work that it's doing. It says a vessel engaged in mine clearance operations shall, in addition to the lights prescribed for a power-driven vessel in Rule 23, or to the lights or shape prescribed for a vessel at anchor,
exhibit 3 all-round green lights or 3 balls. One of these lights or shapes shall be exhibited near the foremast head and one at each foreyard. These lights or shapes indicate that it's dangerous to approach within 1,000 meters of the mine clearance vessel. So how I remember this is 3 green in a tree, stay away from me. And I just think of this as a tree pattern, maybe like a Christmas tree. So you have your 3 green, one on each foreyard and one on the forehead. So you've got your mast T here, one up top and one on each side. That's kind of what that means simply. So 3 green in a tree, stay away from me. Or the corresponding day shapes would be 3 balls. They are not in line. That's another type of vessel, okay? But they are at like a triangle pattern. And that means do not approach closer than 1,000 meters, okay? And then at the bottom of the page, it says vessels less than 12 meters in length, except those engaged in diving operations, shall not be required to exhibit the lights prescribed in this rule. And so those are a very small vessel. They don't have any kind of way of showing these lights or shapes, so we just give them a pass. And then rule number 28, I have here, which is constrained by draft, CBD, constrained by draft. And if you remember, that had to do with vessels that were very deep drafted, that if you make them go out of the path they're following, it would be dangerous and they could possibly run aground. And I gave the example of maybe a cruise ship down in the Caribbean trying to avoid coral reefs or shallow spots trying to go to a port. This is international only. This is not recognized in the inland rules. If she has a situation where she's going to claim constrained by draft, she will show 3 red in line or a cylinder shape. And I always think of that as like a can, draft beer can might be a way to remember that. Constrained by draft beer can. And then the red, that's always a tough one to kind of come up with the memory aid. Some people will say red rubbing rocks, meaning 3 R's, 3 red in a line. If you move me out of my way, I'll be on the rocks. There's a couple different ways to remember that, but just kind of focus on the 3 reds and the draft can, and that will get you to constrained by draft. And then on rule 29, which is the pilot vessels, it says at or near the masthead 2 all-round lights, the upper being white, lower being red. That is here, white over red, pilot ahead. White over red, pilot ahead. And when underway, side lights and a stern light. So she's not going to show that masthead light. When at anchor, in addition to the lights here, she will show the anchor lights for a vessel of her size. So she does not show a masthead light, but she could show anchor lights. And this is when she's engaged in pilotage duties. If she is not engaged in pilot duties, she will show the lights for a power-driven vessel. Now, that does not give her any kind of priority like we talked about in Rule 18. Remember, that was only new reels catch fish, so purchase some worms. Pilot doesn't fall into that. This is more of an identity light, so that if I'm pulling into a port and I'm looking for a pilot that's going to come on board, it would be very obvious to me in a low visibility situation or night situation which vessel is the pilot boat.
Okay, the next rule that we're going to cover is rule number 30. And we are going to discuss anchored vessels and vessels aground. And I've tried to draw up a couple different scenarios because this is a section that really gets students confused, especially when looking at some of the diagrams in the diagram book that the Coast Guard provides. So I want to make sure that we cover this in good detail so you can understand the differences. So on page 90 and 91, it says a vessel at anchor shall exhibit where best seen in the forepart an all-round white light or 1 ball, the black ball, at or near the stern and at a lower level than the light prescribed above, an all-round white light. A vessel is less than 50 meters in length may exhibit an all-round white light where best seen instead of what we just said. And then a vessel at anchor may, and a vessel of 100 meters or more in length shall use available working light or equivalent lights to illuminate her decks. So let's talk about what all of that meant. So generally they want anchored vessels to show something like this here, where you have a all-round white light forward and you have a all-round white light aft, and the aft is lower. And the reason for that is because we want to differentiate the bow from the stern, or the point where you're anchored from the other end. And so if I'm looking at this vessel and I see the higher light here, I know that the anchor chain is going out from that direction, and that is the area that I want to avoid when I'm going around this vessel or crossing this vessel, because I don't want to cross over their anchor chain. It might be really taut, or the anchor rod might not be slack, and so if you cross over that anchor chain, you could get yourself into some trouble. So that is the reason for this forward light being of a different height, so that you can differentiate the bow from the stern. And most vessels anchor from the bow. And so the higher light is in the front, the lower light is in the back. Now, it also said that a vessel of less than 50 meters can just show one all-round white light where best seen. And I've put it up here forward where the anchor chain is, and that's fine. So how I remember this, if you're less than 50 meters, really all you have to show is the one all-round white light forward. If you're 50 meters or greater, you are required to show one forward and one aft, with the aft being lower. Now, a vessel of 100 meters or greater will show one forward, one aft that's lower, plus deck lighting, which I've indicated here with some blue lights. They don't have to be blue. It could be amber, some sort of deck lights that you have on board your vessel. But what I'm used to is some light blue lights that just kind of illuminate the decks. And the reason for that is if I have a white light forward and a white light aft, and this ship is 900 feet long, I might think from a distance that's two different anchored vessels, and I might try to go through the middle of that, which would result in a collision. So we don't want to have that. So what we're going to have is that deck lighting to illuminate the size of that vessel, just to show you that it's not two individual vessels, it's one really large vessel. And so this small vessel can show all of this, right? She can illuminate her decks and she can show both white lights, right? This vessel can also show the deck lights. So you can always show more than what's required, but you can never show less. That's why they use the word shall for this vessel that's 100 meters or more. She will show her deck lights, okay? So for anchored, the single black ball applies to any size vessel at anchor. That does not change for the day shape. So whatever vessel I'm on, it's going to be the single black ball, but the lighting changes. So single all-round white for less than 50. She could show this though. 50 meters or greater, one forward, one aft. The forward one that's higher indicates where the anchor chain is out. And then 100 meters or greater, forward and aft, plus the deck lighting. And remember, the higher forward one is showing where that anchor chain's going out so that we don't run it over, okay? Now, the next, one more thing on the next page, letter E. It says a vessel of less than 7 meters in length when at anchor, not in or near a narrow channel, fairway, anchorage, or where other vessels normally navigate, shall not be required to exhibit the lights or shapes. Just because they're so small, and typically they'd have no way to show those lights or shapes. And then it says a vessel of less than 12 meters in length when aground shall not be required to show those. Jump over to the inland side of page 93. It says on letter G, a vessel of less than 20 meters when at anchor or in a special anchorage area designated by the Coast Guard shall not be required to exhibit the anchor lights or shapes prescribed by the rule. So if you're in a special anchorage area, the assumption is that you're anchored. So if you've got a bunch of vessels that are overnighting in an anchorage, you don't need to have 50 different lights showing. Other vessels should know that those vessels are at anchor in that anchorage. But remember, you have to be less than 20 meters for this rule to apply to you. So that's always a test question, just to kind of annotate what is the distance of this vessel overall, so we know how to answer this question. And then right below that, on letter H, one more note, the following barges shall display at night and if practicable in periods of restricted visibility the lights described in paragraph I of this rule. So every barge projecting into a buoyed or restricted channel, every barge moored that it reduces the available navigable width of the channel to less than 80 meters, barges moored in groups of more than 2 barges wide or a maximum width of 25 meters, every barge not moored parallel to the dock or bank, turn the page, says barges described in that paragraph shall carry 2 unobstructed all-round white lights visible for at least 1 nautical mile. So if you have any of those barges that are in any of those situations, we need to light those. So 1 forward and 1 aft, which is consistent with the anchor lights. Now let's turn back to 92 and 93 and talk about the aground vessel. Hopefully no one has to show this particular lighting or day-shaped configuration, but you should be able to recognize it if you do see it. A vessel aground shall exhibit the lights in paragraph A or B of this rule. In addition, where best seen, 2 all-round red lights in a vertical line or 3 black balls. Okay, now notice they said in addition to the other lights. So what they're saying is bring over all of this, bring over all of the anchor lights for your size vessel and add 2 red lights. Okay, add in 2 red lights. So that's why people get confused, because they see the red over red and they think the vessel is dead, not under command. But remember, on a not under command vessel, you never see white lights forward because they don't show a forward masthead light. And so when you're looking at diagrams, such as diagram 44 in the diagram book, a lot of people choose the selection of not under command, and that's not true. It's actually this vessel right here, a vessel that's 50 to 100 meters, that's aground. So it has the forward anchor light and the red over red, so less than 50. Forward anchor light, aft anchor light, 50 meters or greater with the 2 red aground. Forward, aft, deck lighting means 100 meters or greater. Let me update that real quick. Okay, and with the reds, it means that the vessel is aground. That's very important. So anchor lights combined with red over red means that the vessel is aground. You just are figuring out what size it is. Okay, that is a question that people miss a lot. And if you have access to the diagram book, look at it. Diagram 44 is this right here. A forward and aft anchor light plus the red over red means the vessel is aground. So all we've done for aground is carry over the anchor lights and add in red over red. Okay. Now the day shape is 3 black balls. Okay. There's a lot of balls in line, and that means aground. Don't relate that to constrained by draft. Remember, constrained by draft was red over red over red, which sometimes we equate red with balls, but that is not the case. Remember, constrained by draft was the can, the draft beer can, whereas aground is 3 black balls in line. Okay. Now, let's go back to the rule here and just see if there's anything else that applies. Okay, that's pretty much it for aground. It does mention on letter F, a vessel of less than 12 meters in length when aground shall not be required to exhibit the lights or shapes of this rule. So if she's small and aground, we're just going to let her be how she is. Now the last rule in the lights and shapes is on page 96, and that is for seaplanes. And it says where it is impracticable for a seaplane or wing and ground craft to exhibit the lights and shapes and characteristics or in the position prescribed by this rule, she shall exhibit them as closely similar as in characteristic and position as possible. So what they mean there is If you have a seaplane, she should have a red light on the port wing and a green light on the starboard wing and a white light forward, just to kind of imitate what a vessel might look like as she is landing and taking off from the water. Okay, so that summarizes the lights and shapes section, which is section 3 of this Rules of the Road review. We will continue on with section 4, which will be the sound signals. A lot of people are interested in learning more about sound signals. So we'll catch you in lesson number 4. All right, thank you.